You're gonna have to just sit back there when people start talking.
What's the best? What's your favorite? What's your favorite sport? Watch, friends and countrymen, independent and uncoordinated.
You gotta turn it on. Turn it on.
Maybe we shouldn't be broadcasting this now.
Submission.
He doesn't need a mic.
Lies and organization.
You gotta turn it up. There we go.
1, 2, 2, freedom. 1, 2. We want a government that is not for sale. We want a government that is not for sale. We want a government that is not for sale. As they say at Mom's Rising, it's time to use our outside voices. That's what we got right here.
That's it? Go. Okay.
And did you get the, can you get the map on the, when I speak?
The
about
wide
map?
shot? Yeah, I can do that.
Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful day. Here we're going to talk about our democracy and taking it back from the corporations. This is the 28th Amendment National Roadshow right here in DC in front of the Chamber of Commerce. And a lot of people think getting to a 28th Amendment, that corporations are not people and money is not speech, is impossible. But that's not true. We've had 27 other amendments, and we're going to have this 28th one in not too far in the future. I want to show you a map showing that 42 states have already taken action towards this 28th Amendment. 4 years ago, that map would have been all gray. Only 8 states remain in the gray. 42, the majority, have done something towards this 28th Amendment. 2 states got to vote on it on the ballot, where all the voters got to vote on that. That was Montana in the red and Colorado in the red. So you can see very diverse populations, Montanans, and, or I don't know what you call them, people from Montana. Cowboys. And people from Colorado. Over 70%, both times in those ballots. This is a nonpartisan issue. We, the people, want money out of politics. We want our politicians to listen to us, we, the people. They work for us. We have to remember that. The other states, you will see, several have had legislative action. Several have had actions on the town level. And just this summer in California and Vermont, they have called for the Article 5 Amendments Convention. That's 2 down, 36 to go. And that was just this summer. So we have some really great speakers for you today. First, we're going to hear from Robert Weissman from Public Citizen, who did a lot of work on the Democracy for All amendment, which just did very well in the Senate. And then we have Jeff Clements, who is a co-founder of Free Speech for People and who's written a great book, which we also have for sale, Corporations Are Not People. And then later we will also have Brendan Fisher from the Center for Media and Democracy, and they've done a lot of work with ALEC and outing ALEC. I think all of you now know who ALEC are, but he will share some of that stuff. So without further ado, we will have Mr. Rob Weissman.
Thanks, Holly. So Holly asked me to speak for 40 to 45 minutes. So sit down and get ready to start taking some notes. Jeff Clements, who will be speaking momentarily, wrote this book, as Holly said, Corporations Aren't People, and he recounts an important story, which is where I'm going to begin my comments. The ideas that were, I have to get up on this thing? The ideas that are embodied in the Citizens United decision, the idea that corporations should have the same constitutional rights as real, live, living, breathing human beings, the idea that corporate spending or anybody's spending should be given robust First Amendment protections like actual real people's speech. Those are not ideas that are found in the Constitution itself. They are invented doctrines of an activist Supreme Court. And they don't go back that far. The corporate personhood one has an older history, but its modern day manifestations really only goes back to the 1970s. And the money is speech doctrine only goes back to the 1970s. So we can't imagine a world where these doctrines don't control our lives, because it wasn't so long ago that that was our world. How did we get to where we are? Well, Jeff talks about this in the book. In 1971, a man named Lewis Powell, who was soon going to become a Supreme Court justice but wasn't at the time, wrote a memo. And he wrote this memo to the broad business community because he was worried that things were out of control, that people were in the streets, and there was an environmental movement demanding change, and there was an anti-war movement demanding an end to empire, and there was a civil rights movement demanding equality for all, and there was a rising consumer rights movement. And even in Washington, things seemed to be getting out of control. So he advised business that it was time for them, for big business, to organize. And he said, by the way, that one of the key things that business could do was utilize an activist-minded Supreme Court. It's very convenient advice for someone who subsequently was going to become one of the activists on the Supreme Court and carry out his vision. Although even Lewis Powell could not possibly have imagined the Supreme Court we currently have and the gifts it's bestowed to big business. But Powell wrote this long memo which basically became the work plan for big business, and a core piece of it was this that Jeff writes about from Powell's memo. Independent and coordinated activity by individual corporations, as important as this is, will not be sufficient. Strength lies in organization, in careful long-range planning and implementation, in consistency of action over an indefinite period of years, in the scale of financing available only through joint effort, and in the political power available only through united action and national organizations. That's an incredibly important piece. And there's two things to take away from it. One is, so the business guys did that, and here we are. So if we want our roadmap for what we're supposed to do, it's that. It's organize more, be bigger, be more coordinated, and build the power to offset what they're doing. But the other thing is, what's the manifestation of that organized business? The manifestation of the organized business is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, right here, with their disappointingly dirty job sign up because they're too lazy to take down their sign and get it cleaned. They could create some jobs, actually. If they did that, it would be one of their bigger contributions to society lately. But the Chamber of Commerce represents the problems and carries out the program that is why we need to have the 28th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, to overturn Citizens United, but overturn Buckley v. Vallejo and other dangerous Supreme Court rulings as well. So the Chamber of Commerce has inserted itself into elections prior to Citizens United, but post-Citizens United in a way that is different than anything that came before, in a way that's different than anything Lewis Powell could have imagined in his call to arms 40 years ago. So in the last couple elections, they're spending around $50 million a year in disclosed spending. Of course, we don't know who's funding the chamber at all, but we know how much they're spending. It's around $50 million. They didn't do well in 2012, but they did super well in 2010. And they were critically responsible for affecting the outcome of the 2010 elections. And they've been hugely responsible for the outcome of the elections in 2014 already, as they've inserted themselves into Republican primaries, trying to defeat a whole weird breed of candidates of Tea Party affiliated people, but who actually represent some populist strain, and to put forward a corporate-oriented version, an extremist but corporate-oriented version of the Republican Party. And they've succeeded in almost every primary they've been in. Now they're in the general election and trying to do the same thing, spending $50 million more, probably considerably more, this election cycle. There's no way for regular human beings to offset that kind of money or the larger sums that are being allocated by the Koch brothers, by Sheldon Adelson, almost $100 million personally. Koch brothers, by the way, are responsible for 1 in 10 of all political ads on this year. So as we think about the 28th Amendment and think about what happened in the U.S. Senate last month and what we need to do to go forward, we think about Lewis Powell and his call to arms for the creation of a working plutocracy to displace a working democracy. The campaign spending system we have is a manifestation of that. We've got all this money going into these super PACs, the sort of post-Citizens United created thing. The top 100 donors are responsible for more than half of all the money going to super PACs. We have a very small number of people and a very small number of corporations who are effectively controlling elections and controlling the forward motion of our democracy. So as Holly said, most people think this is crazy stuff. They can't stand it and they think it's crazy, and it's not just sort of Democrats, it's across the party. It's a partisan divide. Republicans agree overwhelmingly favor a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, can't stand all the outside spending, can't stand super PACs, can't stand big business control of Washington. 70, 80, 90% of the population agrees on that diagnosis of the problem, and also on the remedy of a constitutional amendment to clear the decks that makes it possible to impose reasonable restraints on campaign spending and to end corporate spending on elections altogether. That popular consensus is partly just a response to the facts on the ground and how bad elections are, but it's also a reflection of all the organizing that's gone on since 2010 to advance a constitutional amendment. At the end of 2010, there were 4 U.S. senators who favored a constitutional amendment to fix Citizens United. At the end of 2012, there were 26. Didn't seem possible we were going to get much past that. Then the McCutcheon decision was handed down by the Supreme Court in April of this year. Numbers got up into the 30s. And there was enough pressure building, enough evidence of the grassroots demand for action that the Democratic leadership in the Senate said we're going to have a floor vote on the amendment. And at the end of the day, this was not preordained, but at the end of the day, 54 U.S. senators voted for a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, to overturn McCutcheon v. FEC, to overturn Buckley v. Vallejo, and restore our democracy. The amendment is pretty simple. It basically says Congress and the states have the right to regulate campaign spending. And all this crazy stuff the Supreme Court has invented that is not in the Constitution, not allowed to say that anymore. We, the people, are taking control of our elections. We, the people, are restoring our democracy. We, the people, now are going to displace this working plutocracy that Lewis Powell helped engineer 40 years ago. And we, the people, will have control again of our country. So as we try to deal with problems like catastrophic climate change or rising inequality, joblessness, a healthcare system that is an affront to human dignity and human rights, as we try to deal with massive Wall Street fraud and criminality and corporate ripoffs. We're going to have a political system that is functional and able to take on the corporate power that is responsible for all those problems. So 54 votes, or 55 if you count the one who wasn't there. 55 is not a two-thirds majority. And we don't have a two-thirds majority yet in the U.S. Congress either. But we've made more progress in the last 4.5 years than any reasonable or even unreasonable person could have imagined possible. And the momentum we have now, fueled by the outrage of the current election, is going to take us that much further in the next election cycle. And it is not too far from the day when the 28th Amendment Roadshow will not be a roadshow about something we envision and imagine in the future. It'll be a roadshow of celebration of what we've done and how we have advanced our democracy, how we have beaten back the Chamber of Commerce, how we have defeated the vision of Lewis Powell, how we have restored our democracy, how we have taken back the First Amendment, and how we have reclaimed our country and recommitted ourselves to doing what we should and the sensible things that any reasonable human being would want to do living in the richest country in the world to make our country better and fairer and safer and cleaner and more just. That's the roadshow we're looking for you to do, Holly. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Rob. It's such an inspiration. And next up, we have Jeff Clements. Yay.
Thank you, Holly.
Book is for sale. Oh, one last thing.
Yeah.
And we are live streaming this. So I have some cards so you can get to our website and share this so that you can spread this after we're done. People can continue to see it, not just now, not just live streaming, but online in perpetuity.
Thank you, Holly, and hello everybody here. Hello everyone out on the live stream. This is a really important event. It's always hard to follow Rob Weissman, who inspires us and who's working, leading this fight all around the country. I won't repeat, well, I might repeat a little bit what he said, because I think it's something we all want to say. We're all repeating this around the country. This is what Americans are talking about. We get it. It's not necessary to educate every American that we have a plutocracy problem. We have to let people believe that we can fix it. And that's what this amendment roadshow is all about. That's what the Democracy for All amendment's all about. And that's the progress we've made so far, showing that actually, yeah, we Americans can fix it. We still have what it takes. So let me just touch on a couple of things. The Supreme Court is back in town this week. So I brought the Constitution with me today, and I wanted to read. It's like Rob did a reading. I want to do a reading too. The Constitution of the United States of America opens with who owns this thing? We, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union. We, the people, not we, the people with money, not we, the corporations, not we, the Chamber of Commerce and other corporate front groups that are trying to take over our democracy. It's we, the people. And so what we're fighting for is that timeless principle that Americans have always fought for. And it's tough. You know, democracy is always on the line. And what Citizens United says is, no, we don't have that fight anymore. It's not we the people anymore. You know, the political equality, that somehow there's something wrong with that. That somehow money now decides who has more of a say in our politics. And that's just wrong. And that's why we're doing this. It's wrong that we have $25 billion coming into our elections, often secret dark money through front groups like the Chamber, coming into our elections. It's wrong that it's money of so few. You know, that's the thing I think some people don't realize, that it's not just a lot of money. something like less than 1/2 of 1% is responsible for almost all the political money. That's wrong. It's wrong when Chevron dumps millions of dollars into the Speaker of the House's leadership PAC, so we don't get to talk about the climate catastrophe, let alone fix it. We don't get to talk about fossil fuel subsidies in the billions that are still going on. So that's wrong. The Supreme Court back in town, so we should be ready for more disasters. Last time they extended this idea of corporate constitutional rights, corporate rights, to freedom of religion. The Hobby Lobby case, 13,000 employees of a corporation, their rights don't count at all because we now have a corporate right to freedom of religion to deny those employees what they're entitled to under the law, birth control within their health insurance plans. So what we have is a radical faction of the Supreme Court that is trying to inject into this Constitution of we the people a principle that is just against everything America stands for. It's a principle that economic inequality somehow has to be naturally, mandatorily reflected in political inequality. It's the exact opposite of the American principle, that no matter our different economic circumstances, we come into our elections as equals, we participate in politics as equals, we have representation as equals. In St. Louis now, we have a denial of the right of the citizens of St. Louis to have a ballot initiative about whether to vote on fossil fuel subsidies for corporations. That got struck off the ballot, a violation of corporate rights. Chevron's not just spending money here in Washington. They put $1.3 million into a city council election in a community of 100,000 people. That's Richmond, California, where there's a dirty, dangerous refinery they run. I heard from the mayor that they're putting $2 million in this year. So this is affecting us all over the country. And, Rob used the word plutocracy. I'm using the word plutocracy, and it has a meaning that is what we are living with now. The meaning is government of the wealthy few. And I was up in Maine. I was telling Mike Peabody, I was up in Maine just on Monday night speaking. And, central Maine, this is north central Maine. I was in Waterville. It's, they think of Portland as like, San Francisco and sort of somewhere else. Central Maine is real people, down to earth, middle of the road, even somewhat conservative. And I was, mulling, should I use words like plutocracy? Does that sound? And I happened that morning to open up the Kennebec Journal. It's the old newspaper, the daily newspaper in Augusta and Waterville and that area. And my in-laws who live in Gardner, Maine, another down-to-earth place, I've read the Kennebec Journal for years, so I've often, not agreed with its editorial position, I'll just say that. And I get to the editorial page of the Kennebec Journal on Monday morning before I was going to go speak, and I came across this editorial. This is the view of the Kennebec Journal, and I'm quoting, "Government cannot be expected to work for the people with this level of campaign spending done by only a few. As income inequality expands, the people who benefit the most from current economic policies are also the ones with outsized influence on those policies." And then the Kennebec Journal said this, "There is a name for government by the rich, plutocracy. And it's not what our founding fathers were trying to create when they guaranteed our freedom of speech." That's the Kennebec Journal, Waterville, Maine. I've been all around the country, like Rob's been all around the country. A lot of you folks have been all around the country carrying this fight. You can read that in any daily newspaper anywhere in this country. That's why people in Montana, when they voted to put Mitt Romney in the White House by 10 points easily, they also voted 75% to 25% for this 28th Amendment that we're all working for. We are bringing Americans together to do what Americans do when the chips are down. Winston Churchill loved America. His mother was American. And he said once that Americans always do the right thing after exhausting all the other possibilities. So we have exhausted the other possibilities. We are doing the right thing. We are doing this 28th Amendment. And let me just tell you why I know we're going to win this. It is hard. Nobody's going to delude you folks that this is somehow an easy path. It's hard, but it's what Americans do in extraordinary circumstances, as James Madison said. So how do we know we do this? How do we know we can do this? Well, let's look at our history, right? So the convention came out with the Constitution in 1787. Don't worry, it's 200 years, but I'm going to do it in about 2 minutes, tops. They come out with the Constitution after the convention. They present it to the people very proudly. Look at this beautiful document we've done. And the people said, no, not good enough. We want a Bill of Rights. 10 constitutional amendments, not just one, 10 before it was ratified. So that's our Bill of Rights. A few years later, the Supreme Court said that the states can be dragged into federal court by bondholders. The people didn't like that. We got the 11th Amendment that overturned the Supreme Court. That was the first time out of 7 times that the American people said to the court, you're wrong, you're going to ruin our democracy, we're going to fix it with a constitutional amendment. After the Civil War, to renew the promise that we actually mean all are created equal. We're actually going to live for that proposition. 3 constitutional amendments, one of which overturned they all sort of, the 13th, 14th, and 15th, overturned the abomination of the Dred Scott decision of the Supreme Court. And it's not just old history. We did it in the Progressive era when we had a plutocracy once again. Big corporate power had massed. We did 4 constitutional amendments in 10 years between 1913 and 1920. We think we elect senators. Well, we didn't always. Senators were appointed by the states, and the process was dominated by corporations and big money in 1912, and the people said, no more, we're going to elect our senators. They did the 17th Amendment. The Supreme Court back then confused big money with democracy. They struck down the progressive income tax, said we're not allowed to have a federal income tax. The people said, yes, we are, overturned the Supreme Court with the 16th Amendment to the Constitution. The Supreme Court said women, half of our nation, half of humanity, doesn't have a right to vote. The 19th Amendment, we fixed that and said, yes, everybody has a right to vote. Everybody has a right to be represented. Everybody counts in this democracy. Over and over and over again, we did this. And if you think it hasn't been recently, between 1960 and 1971, 4 more amendments. We overturned the Supreme Court, which said states can have poll taxes to keep the poor, to keep, down in the South, to keep African Americans from voting, to keep the poor from voting. We had poll taxes. The Supreme Court said, oh, that's just fine. No, the American people said, no, it's not fine. We had a constitutional amendment to overturn that. The Supreme Court said when Americans were going off to Vietnam at 18, 19, and 20 years old and had no representation, had no vote, the Supreme Court said, that's just fine. No right to vote for 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. Constitutional amendment in 1971 said, yes, they do. And then even you folks in Washington, D.C. got some representation in those years with a constitutional amendment. Not enough, that's right, but you got some. And that was a constitutional amendment. Maybe we need another one after we're done with this one. But we got some statehood fans here for D.C. So, we know how to do this. And I refuse to believe, and I know you do too, that we're the first generation of Americans that don't have what it takes when the Supreme Court gets it wrong, when the chamber and mass corporate power tries to take over our democracy, when Citizens United says big money counts more than people, that we're the only generation of Americans who say, oh, well, I guess that's too bad. It's hard to do an amendment. It really doesn't very good, but let's go home. We're not going to do that because we're Americans. We know what to do. We're going to fix our country. We're going to get the 28th Amendment. We're going to bring Americans together, whether they're Republicans, Democrats, independents. We're going to hold this 75, 80% consensus that agrees with us until that map is filled out and we have the 28th Amendment added to this and the Supreme Court is corrected by we the people one more time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's amazing. I could listen to 30 more minutes.
Okay.
So I wanted to make this actually a little bit interactive. All of you are here because you care about this. It's about we, the people. So I know this could get a little out of control, so I want, if you're willing to say, come up for a minute or two and say why you're here. Why do you care about getting to a 28th Amendment? And I've been talking to a few people in the audience about why they're here. So, like this gentleman, would you be willing to come up? And yeah, you. I really liked what you had to say, and I think the audience would agree with you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you so much. I guess you can know from my accent, I'm not a US citizen. But I'm here because I believe in what you're doing. And I believe if you can take this power from the corporation, you can get back your government. Because your government is taking you to wars overseas and having your soldier being killed for a conflict you have nothing to do with, except for the defense companies putting millions and millions of dollars to create these conflicts and to really push these conflicts and to push their cells into the US government and other governments around the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So does anybody else want to come up and, share? Yes. I'll let you get it.
Yeah, I was the guy yelling about statehood. Keep this in mind. When there was a constitutional amendment out there to be ratified by the states after, sorry, yep, after it had been voted for by the likes of the Dixiecrat candidate for President of the United States, Strom Thurmond, and a bunch of other Republicans off on that wing, it was ALEC who had one of their first major legislative triumphs by killing that in the state legislatures. The briefing book that they used to do that is a real giggle. They reprint happily the speech of one of their senators on the Senate floor that said, you can't let the people of the United States vote because they don't know anything about soybeans. Nothing about soybeans. They're not like us. They have no soybeans.
Thank you. So anybody else in the audience? Oh yes, I see somebody. This is getting fun now. So please get on the stage so we don't have the feedback.
Yeah, hi, I'm Stephen Spitz. I'm with Progressive Democrats of America. And I just wanted to give you an anecdote, which is sort of why I'm here. A couple years ago, I was standing outside the Rayburn building, House Office building, in a line. It was a nice day, it was 10 minutes long. And I see about 5 guys in suits walk to the front of the line and just butt in line to go in. And I was outraged by that. Why can't they wait in line? I went up to the front of the line. I live in Virginia, and one of them had a badge on that said, I'm a proud Virginia banker. And I said, sir, there's a line. Get in line. And he just ignored me and walked right in. And somebody in line said, yeah, well, they own the Congress, so of course they could come in without waiting in line. That's what this is all about. Who owns the Congress? Is it those guys across the street, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, or is we the people?
Thank you. Do we have anybody else that would like to join us in sharing why you care about getting corporations out of our democracy? Yes. Yeah, please.
Don't worry, I'm not going to do 30 more minutes. I just want to say, because I don't think it has been said, Holly is behind a just fantastic movie called Pay to Play. It's out now. It's playing all across the country, Holly, right? Or it's getting there. So check out Pay to Play, right? And watch the movie. It's really been some terrific work. It helps drive the amendment movement forward. So thank you to Holly and the team behind that.
Oh, yes. Okay. And we are just waiting for Brendan Fisher, which is, he should be here soon. But I will tell you a little bit more about our film. So our website is pay2play.tv, and we really looked at the problem of the corrupting influence of money in politics. We started in Ohio with the CoinGate scandal, where $50 million of the workers' comp money was funneled through Tom Noe. He later did jail time, and he was putting it into the Republican Party. And we followed that story, and then Citizens United happened, and we expanded outwards. And then this year we followed up and were able to add the McCutcheon case and the Hobby Lobby decision, that, you know, these privately held corporations are now able to get into our have religious rights. So I've gotten more and more caring about this issue as I've been following these stories, and that's why I'm out here and trying to organize these issues and bring people together across the country. We held 5 other 28th Amendment National Roadshows. We had one at UCLA, one in Berkeley, one in Seattle, one in Portland, and one in Madison. And now we wanted to bring it right here to the Chamber of Commerce. So I encourage you guys to see that film, Pay to Play, and I would still love to hear from more of you. Why do you guys care about getting money out of politics? Chris?
So I guess I'm just here to kill a little bit more time. I guess the reason I'm here is because it sounds academic when we talk about the Constitution, we talk about all these decisions, but these are decisions that have real impacts on real people, not corporate people, but have real impacts on real people. And we talk about those who benefit from the ownership of Congress and things like that. But there are people that suffer because of the ownership of Congress, and people that lose their rights because of the ownership of Congress. And I think that's really what motivates me, and that's why I'm here. And I would say one other thing, somewhat anecdotally, which is I used to work for a major pharmaceutical company, and that pharmaceutical company had a big PAC, and they encouraged through various ways to donate to that PAC. And the interesting thing that you realize is that these corporations become a conglomerate of a bunch of money of their individual employees, but they don't represent the interests of those employees. They represent the interests of that company and that company alone. So it's very interesting when you see what that company's PAC would do that has nothing to do with what the interest of those individual people that were coerced or you know, were looking for some advancement within the company, that they donate to this PAC, and that PAC uses money to donate to Chamber of Commerce and to contribute to elections in ways and to candidates that don't represent the interest of those individuals that are under the umbrella of that corporation. So that's why I'm here.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else want to join us in sharing why you're here and why you care? Another thing I want to share, since I'm up here then, oh, what? Stamp Stampede, yes, okay. Then I do have another story to share.
Hey, I'm James. I'm with StampStampede.org, and one of the big reasons that I really care about this issue is just because I don't know how I'm supposed to trust the decisions that are being made in government when you have money corrupting the political process. I want to think that the best ideas are going to prevail, and that those ideas are going to be something that benefit people like me. But when you have money in the system and you have people paying for results, even if you know, there are several steps in between, the fact that you've got so much money in the system just prevents me from being able to believe that the right things are happening, and that that legislators are really looking out for the people that they're supposed to be caring about, the people that they're supposed to be really representing. So that's why I really care about this issue, and that's why I'm involved.
And James, are you going to be stamping some money here? Yeah. We have some stamps over there. So anybody who wants to stamp their money, I know one says not to be used for bribing politicians, and another one I think says stamp money out of politics. So So another thing I wanted to share is that what's happened in California, we were supposed to actually have Prop 49 on the ballot this year, and the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association sued, and they got it taken off the ballot for now. So now it's going before the California Supreme Court to be decided. But I think that the rest of these people at the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association did not want the people of California voting on this issue this year. They didn't want the dialogue happening. The state of California actually has the population of 20 other states combined. So if California voted like Montana and Colorado with over 70% saying we want money out, corporations are not people, money is not speech, that would send an extremely strong message to the rest of the country. So if everybody can help make people aware in California that it was taken off the ballot by the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, and we're hoping that we can still vote on this in the future and work on that in California. And anybody else want to come up and share why you care? Why you're here? Becca, I'd love to hear why you care so much about this topic. No?
Hi, I'm Rebecca, and I produced Pay to Play, Democracy's High Stakes, which is a film about this very topic, along with Holly Mosher that just talked. And I'm going to be coming around and handing out these cards so you can go online and find out where our movie's playing next. And also you can host your own screening. And we'll also update you on this topic. So is that, any questions so far? Anybody else want to come up here? Little song, little dance? Woo! What's your name? Mike Peabody. Give it up for Mike Peabody. Thanks, Mike. You saved me. Thank you. Are you okay to get up here?
Yep. Okay. I just wanted to introduce myself as one of the millennials. And I'm in this issue because I ran for Congress in 1968. My total budget was $75,000. Today, that has increased to $1.5 million in order to be an average spender if you're a political candidate for Congress. And for the Senate, it's $10 million. And back in those days, you could raise the money from constituents. Today, in order to be able to run, you've got to put your hands out to the special interests. That started in the 70s and grew every year and is still growing today. So it is absolutely impossible for you to, as a congressman or a senator, to be your own person any longer, because most of your money has to come from large givers who are outside your constituents. So that is where the problem is. Somehow we've got to solve that. Obviously, the very best way of doing so is by public financing of elections, which will take care of what we call not the dark money, but the regular money, the hard money. Hard money can be controlled by public financing. Then we have to go after the soft money, which I think is going to need an amendment to do it. We're here together. It's a very small group, but so are all the other organizations and all the other issues at the beginning of their move forward. We know that the group is there to support us. Let's do it.
All right, thank you. You want to come up, sir? Okay.
I just want to follow up Mike Peabody and say I'm a member of the greatest generation, which is actually what I mean is the millennials, and I hope it will become the next greatest generation. There, right there, that guy. Hello, Internet. My name is Mark Belisle. I'm a blogger for progressive causes. I just want to say that I'm here to talk about the money in politics. There's a lot of statistics that I think illustrate this whole picture. One of the biggest things I think that a lot of people don't realize is that in the 1960s, CEOs on average made about 12 times what their average line level workers are making. Today, it's about 450 times. And so I think that when you consider how much financial power has been concentrated in a few hands, and now they're essentially trying to roll back our democracy to gain political power to go along with the financial power. And I think this Chamber of Commerce right here is the symbol of that concentration. So I think that what you guys are doing right now is amazing. I think the grassroots movements, the people getting out into the street and having their voices heard and actually speaking, because the Supreme Court would have you believe that a check for $100 million is speech, but the reality is that people coming up here and holding a mic is speech. Giving a check is not speech. That is paying for a service. Like, for example, buying crack is paying for a service, but we don't protect that under the First Amendment. So I think that what the Supreme Court has done here is essentially, and I think that most Americans would agree, is to sanction crime as long as it's done by rich people. So I think this is something that we all need to get out into the street and hold mics and have actual speaking about what has happened to our free speech. So thank you.
Thank you. So unfortunately, our last speaker, well, we were supposed to have two more speakers. We were supposed to have the wonderful Amanda Neef, who wrote The Citizen Lobbyist, but her dog had a seizure this morning, so she could not join us. And then Brendan Fisher from Center for Media and Democracy, where they're doing amazing work on ALEC Exposed. They got the leaks that found the 800 model legislative bills, and they unearthed that and put that online. So I'm really sad that they can't join us, but I don't want to keep, unless any last person wants to say anything, I think we're going to wrap it up for today. You'd like to share something? Sure. And then this will be the last one, and we will call it a day, but the beginning of the fight.
How you doing? My name is John. I'm actually a native Washingtonian. I was born in 1988. Not a great year, but still in all, my story is a long story, so I'm not going to get into it. I just say this. I'm interested in changing the world by changing myself, because it all starts with us. See, the funny thing about life is you go through life trying to figure out what's right, and you never really figure out what is right, because everybody's perspective is their own perspective, which kind of says if you want a better election, you might just want to voice your opinion, That's it, and that's all, basically. I can't say anything more, because anything more would be uncivilized, so I just keep it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think what you're really saying is we all need to vote and get out the vote and voice ourselves at the polls this November. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate sharing this event with you, and please share the links online so that people can, join us virtually at any time in the future. Thank you so much.